Welcome to Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions. I am your host, Craig Pera, and this is a broadcast designed, or our intention is to help you create healthy sexuality and a great life. It's our belief that those two things are inexorably intertwined. And for so many of our brothers in the program, their faith plays such an important role in their journey to healthy sexuality and a great life. And while the Mindful Habit is a secular program, we support men from every spiritual background and some men with none. But we're so happy, and I'm so blessed to have on my team George Morning. He is been with us now for 6 years, and he's such an important coach on the team. And I'm really glad to have you here today, George. Welcome.
Thank you again, man. Thanks a lot, Craig, for having me here today for the podcast. Absolutely glad to be able to share, in my journey, what I've learned. And I just want to be very clear with you guys. Look, I'm not a theologist. I haven't gone to school or anything along those lines. I'm not a reverend or a pastor. I'm merely a Christian that is a porn addict. And I had a journey that went with it. And I know that the more that we end up sharing our journey with one another, the greater chance we have of being able to actually come out and be able to seek some help. And I want to help connect some of the dots along the way that I know for me personally, I've experienced as a Christian going through recovery, how I have professionally worked with people in the spiritual space and understand some of the struggles, and have heard some of the challenges they've had that have conflicted with both their faith, their religion, if you will, the organization of it, and also their recovery. So we're going to just share a couple things today about this, and this is going to be a lot around looking at the awareness. And specifically, one part that I wanted to answer for a lot of people today is, hey, listen, if I am a believer, if I pray, if I do what I'm supposed to do to follow God, I go to church, I pay my tithes, I'm in the choir, I participate in all the activities, why is it that I'm still dealing with this porn addiction? Better yet, why is it so hard for me to get rid of this porn addiction? Why is it that I can't stop this? Why have I maybe seen other people with other afflictions or addictions, and it hasn't been maybe quite as difficult for them with it? And, it's a lot of ways that, I want to be able to present that to you guys, but in a very direct way. And I say this again, coming as a Christian, there's a couple pieces of just awareness we have to have about this. And I think spiritually, a great place to start is looking at Matthew chapter 26, verse 39. And this basically is just summarizing when Jesus is in the garden and he's praying right after the Last Supper. He's like, look, I really don't want to do this. And specifically, he says, look, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou will. Now, here's what's important about that, okay? When he's talking about his cup being passed, he's talking about, of course, not wanting to have to die on the cross. So number one, we don't really get an opportunity to escape the cross. Like, no matter what it's going to look like for us, we don't get an opportunity to escape it. He asked for it, and it didn't happen for him. The second part that we have to understand about this, guys, is that unfortunately, we don't get a chance to choose our cross. We just don't. A lot of us are here sitting thinking that, you know what, because I do this right, I do this right, I do this right, I should only have a problem maybe in these other areas. I should have the problem maybe with my child's grades. I should have the problem maybe with my wife's shopping or something along those lines. But instead, I don't want to have this problem with the porn addiction. This is the one thing that I'm looking at that is too much for me to be able to handle. And the truth of the matter is, guys, is that we don't get a choice in what cross we're going to carry. Guess what? Everybody on the planet is not a porn addict. It's just not the case. Everybody on the planet is not a drug addict. Everybody on the planet is not an alcoholic. Everybody on the planet doesn't have an emotionally abusive childhood. Everybody on the planet doesn't have a sexually abusive childhood. Everybody has something different. We all have something. We don't get a choice in that process. The space that we do get a choice in, though, is where we choose to be able to find the opportunities within what we have to be faced with. Guys, when we look at the cross, what we have to understand is that, yeah, the cross was hard, the cross was dangerous, the cross was difficult, and ultimately he died on the cross. But if you continue and you really stay in your book, then you recognize that what happened was that he actually transcended. It was a transformation that happened because he went through the process of his cross. And that speaks a lot for us. I'll jump out on a limb right now with you, Craig. If you had to compare the best of your both worlds. So you look at the best world, the best life that you've experienced thus far in recovery. And I want you to take a glimpse back to the best life you had prior to recovery. Which one would be better for you?
Yeah, no, that's the easiest answer, man. That's the easiest answer. Post-recovery, post-healing, post-self-control, post-awareness, post-purpose. Post feeding the right wolves,
post transparency, truth, right? All these pieces here, right? We often don't think about that. We're trying to hold on to a part of us that we don't want to let go, thinking that this is the best thing we're going to have. I mean, Craig, I'm pretty sure before you got into recovery and you knew you had to go through this place, I mean, both me and you experienced it, right? Like we've lost careers behind this. We've damaged relationships behind our behaviors. We have jeopardized other relationships behind our behaviors, jeopardized our health behind our physical health behind our behaviors, right? We've done all that. And ironically, we were still trying to find a way to hold on to it. If someone would have been able to tell me how I could function in life and excel in life and get all the good stuff I wanted and keep it, I probably would have listened to them. But guess what? That never happened for me. That never happened for you.
No.
So what happened in the process for both of us, and this is the thing that first attracted me to the mindful habit. Like, I'll never forget the first conversation I had with Craig. It was the summer of 2012. And finally I talked with somebody and it connected. And not only was he able to connect in my pain, he gave me some insight as to what happens after it. And I was like, wait, if you go through, now I was just scared at the time to go through it. But eventually I had to go through it. And when I look at what I have in my life today, yes, I am divorced. I want to make that very clear right now. I have 3 beautiful children, my 2 youngest children on the opposite side of the country right now. But where I am emotionally right now is 1,000 times better for my children than where I was emotionally before recovery. How I am financially right now is 1,000 times better today than where I was before recovery. Where I am in building relationships right now, healthy relationships right now. And that's the big picture we have to look at. Even physically, I was just talking about this the other day. I have gained 50 pounds since I've started recovery. That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. Like, a lot of transformation happens in this process. Don't be upset because this is the method that you have to go through in this transformation. Now, another area that I wanted to touch on here is going to be about boundaries. And particularly, I want to keep this message, in a specific space. Number one, we're coming up on the holiday season right now. And if you're going through anything in your household right now, if there's been a recent discovery or disclosure in your home right now, this is probably going to be a very different holiday season than what it was last year for you. I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some uncomfortable tension that might be there. Like, you may wonder, what's it like going to your wife's family's home, for the holiday season? What's it like being with her in a space where you want to laugh, you want to enjoy, but you see her, and even for the partners, in a very specific way. How are you going to be able to manage this? I know there's a space where it's like, I want to tell people, but then I don't want to tell people. What is it exactly that I should do? And ironically enough, we have a self-study webinar program that we hold a weekly webinar. And this question came up last night. As a matter of fact, this exact question came up last night. And it says, well, I'm going to visit my family for the holidays. I don't know how to be around them. I don't know how to interact with them. And I'm not sure exactly what I should do. And the tool that we gave him actually came from one of my favorite passages in the Bible. 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 5 through 24. And a summary of it, it's about this lady. She has almost everything you can imagine. She has a husband, she has a home, she has money, she has land, and she managed to, create such a great amount of wealth that whenever this prophet was able to come through town, he had a place to stay in her home. And of course, the one thing she didn't have was a child. And the prophet says, by this day in this season, you're going to have a child. She didn't want to believe it, but of course the child came. And then years later, the child is like grown. He passes out, drops dead, just drops dead. So the mom, of course, is like, wait a minute, I ain't asked for the kid, but let me go find the prophet. So she leaves. And this is the important part here. And this is where it connects to where I want to help you guys with in helping to develop boundaries coming into this holiday season, when you may want to communicate certain things that's happening within your home to your family, to your friends. You may not know where to communicate. And what happens for this lady is that when she leaves her home, her neighbor says to her, hey neighbor, how's everything going? How's things going with the family? What's been happening over the past couple of days? And she says, all is well. Now, the message in that I want you all to get is that it's not that she is lying or that she's being a hypocrite. When you're in recovery and when you're in a space of hurt and trauma, it's important that you only share with people who can actually help you. The neighbor couldn't do anything for her dead kid. It'd have been like sharing gossip. And I know that a lot of you all are in a space right now where you're like, who do I talk to? Who do I communicate with? And I'm going to tell you the same thing that I told the guy in the call last night. I said, listen, if you're in our self-study webinar program, or if you're on our online group coaching program, simply pick up, drop a message on any one of the group calls. Send a private message to one person that has a story that may sound like yours. Say, hey, listen, do you mind if I speak to you? Can I reach out and call you? Is that something I can do? And you're creating safety in your communication. One thing that is important is that you're able to develop, like me and Craig was talking about earlier, this transparency and honesty within your communication. So in helping you with some of the shame that you're going to come across, you want to be able to share and communicate with people that can help you. So for any men out there right now, I want to really implore you, listen, be a part of our online program, be part of our self-study program. Come join a community that is here for you. And for your partners, we also have a program here that is just for the partners as well. And the ladies, they are phenomenal. Like, they have gone through it and they are coming out of it like fantastic, fantastic warriors. It's awesome. And it's a part of the community. Every single person that I've talked to in these calls, for the better part, they say the exact same thing. Had it not been for this space, not only would I have not known who to talk to, but I wouldn't have got help with what I needed to talk about. And that's an important piece. So I just wanted to share those two pieces with you and kind of wrap it up in one little area here. Real quick, just checking with Craig here before we go any further. Was there any questions or anything that I might need to kind of go over again from what I just spoke, or keep rocking and rolling here?
Yeah, no, tell me, and I just pulled up 2 Kings 4:5. Tell me why that's important to you. Just bring that home so I understand it, and so our listeners understand that, so they can take this information and, that's my first question.
Absolutely. So as I said before, the story overall is about this woman. She's married. She has everything except for a child, right? And I like to use certain stories that you'll hear, not in a very literal way all the time, but it'll be in somewhat of a figurative way. And again, for us, the thing that we don't have could be that sobriety. We don't have that recovery. We don't have that, maybe you're that woman, you don't have that healing in your trauma space. So as the story goes on, she ends up having a child, but then she loses the child again. The child dies. And so in her method to try to get help for her child, she's leaving out to go find the prophet that first blessed her with the child. And when she's leaving out of the home, her neighbor comes out to her. And her neighbor inquires and says, hey, what's going on with your family? How are things going over there in your household right now? Now, she's experienced tremendous trauma, right? Like, child just died. Husband doesn't know what to do. He's silent through the entire story. And she's just trying to figure out, what do I do with my dead child right now? And this neighbor speaks and says, hey, what's happening in your household? And she says to the neighbor, all is well. And in that, and right out, and once she leaves after that, she then proceeds to go find the prophet. Prophet comes and bring the child back to life. But I share that part of the story in that her communication to the neighbor, in that communication, she established a boundary. She established a boundary of communication, that even though she was dealing with something that was traumatic in her home, even though the neighbor may have had the best intentions, I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys' family will have the quote unquote best intentions in what you want to communicate with them. They're not going to mean any harm, but at the same time, will they be able to actually help you? Besides you being able to get the expression out of saying, hey, this is what just happened, do they offer you any help? And she reserved all communication until she got to that particular prophet. Like, she didn't even talk to the guy that was like assisting him. She was like, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk directly to him about what just happened in my home. So and just connecting that, and I'm glad you asked me to clarify that some, because again, as you enter this holiday season, for a lot of you guys, this is going to be a very different season than what you had last year. This is not going to be the space where you feel like, oh man, we can share everything. There's probably going to be a lot of shame, a lot of trauma for you and with your relationship. And when you're looking around and you're trying to ask yourself, well, wow, who can I talk to? It's interesting. I talked to one of my clients earlier today. I said, how many friends you got? He said, I got a good handful of friends. I said, are they your best friends? He said, yeah. I said, how many of them have you told about your recovery? He said, not a single one. Do you have any siblings? Yep, I got a sibling. Have you told her about your recovery? No, I have not. So you mean to tell me the only people that know about your recovery, that you can communicate with about this, is just me and your wife? And your wife is going to be touch and go because she's still dealing with the trauma of what happened. So now you're really just kind of dependent on me to be present. But it's really saying that, do you have the relationships around you? Again, when you look for the opportunity out of what you have, believe it or not, a crisis actually is more of a light than it is about darkness. Most of us think crisis, and we think about how painful, how hard, how difficult something is going to be. But if you pay attention in the crisis, you're going to realize a lot about relationships. You're going to realize a lot about you, about certain resources you have. Craig, I'm pretty sure, I know for me, I look at the friends that I have now compared to the friends I had before the crisis, and I got a completely different number.
Yeah, same here, man.
Like,
same
once people understood what was actually happening, oh boy, I have the number of people I was able to get in contact with, that changed drastically. Now, part of me wanted to be able to blame the addiction on it. Because of my addiction, I have all these less amount of friends. Because of my addiction, I have these less amount of relationships. Because of my addiction, I have this blank. The reality is that it took the crisis for you to be able to know that you actually have friends around you that are judgmental, that are critical. You have friends that will draw conclusions based on one statement that they can hear. Like, this is what comes out of the crisis. So you get tons of awareness about your surroundings in the crisis. Most people in this program, Craig, particularly our partners, they have no understanding of what emotional boundaries are prior to having this crisis. Like, when you look at their opportunities that they have, most people in this program, they never worked on their self-care. They never knew how to perform self-love. They knew how to seek it. They knew how to get it in an unhealthy way. They didn't know how to get it in a healthy way for them. They didn't know how to create emotional boundaries. They didn't know how to understand and meet their safety needs in a healthy way. So if you look within this, guys, instead of this process being more about why me, look at this process from saying, okay, now what do I get? Because that's part of your opportunity here. Last piece here, guys, just to wrap this up here for you. One of the pieces that we look at a lot, within recovery, and that's a significant piece of our awareness phase in the mindful habit, is our history section, right? Our history section. And here's what we do know. statistically, on average, more than 90% of people who have engaged in an addiction come from a traumatic childhood. Like there is some measure of a traumatic childhood abuse that took place for that child at some point in time. Also, what we do know is that their behavior is more of a pattern within their family as well. Very rarely do we come across the first generation addict. That's a very rare thing that happens these days. More often than not, what happens is that we see addiction follow within every generation. So I shared with you guys last time on the last podcast, as much as I am on my mother's side, the product of a minister and the grandchild of a bishop, I am also the third generation addict on my father's side. My grandfather was an alcoholic. My father was a drug addict and alcoholic. I was a porn addict, opioid addict, and abused alcohol at the same time. Like the addiction followed. What most of us tend to do is that we say, hey, I'm going to be completely different from what I saw. I'm going to be completely different from the trauma that I received. I'm going to be completely different from the addictive behaviors that I saw. I saw my father in an abusive way. I'm going to be completely different from that. Most of us have sought to run away from what it is we've experienced in our childhood. And believe me, I've done it. Even as a father, the first time I was a dad, I never forget the words that came out of my dad's mouth. Or he was like, you're doing such a great job as a dad. I told him, I'm just trying to make sure I don't do the things that were bad that I saw. However, what none of us, not none of us, let me not say none of us, what most of us actually recognize later in life, and I must say that specifically now, more so since I believe 2015, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of people that are seeking mental health. Because most of us now are realizing that, you know what, there is some trauma in my childhood, in my past, that I have not resolved. I didn't resolve it. I compartmentalized it. I tried to put it away. I tried to tell myself that I outgrew it. I got older. I told myself that was just something that all kids experience, right? And we try to disregard it as much as possible to say that it doesn't affect me in my adulthood. But what do we see is that, again, pattern-wise, somehow you will begin to act out that trauma that you experienced as a child. And it's going to come out a lot of different ways. I tell men all day long, your addictive behavior is just a symptom. It's just a symptom. It could look 1,001 different ways, however that it chooses to be expressed at that point in time. One verse that gave me a lot of assurance, and it helped me, and I promise you, had I read this verse and understood this verse before recovery, I would have rejected the entire thing. But reading it after recovery, it makes complete sense to me now. It's Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 5. It says, and the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it. And he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. Now, when we think about that, the land that our fathers possessed, some of you guys, you might have been like me at first and got literal with it. And I was like, well, my daddy don't own no land. So I don't got, that nixes me out of that situation right there. But if you read more of the text in the chapter, it's actually referring to the character of your fathers. And it's referring to how that character impacted the blessings they were going to receive. So when I look at that and I look at the land which my fathers possessed, well, as I just told you guys, third generation addict. Which means what? I'm the third generation that tried to do what? Run away from childhood trauma. I'm the third generation that tried to compartmentalize the trauma, that tried to say I can do better than my previous generation. I guarantee you, my dad did not say I'm going to be a better alcoholic than my grandfather. I bet you my dad said I can handle my alcohol better than my grandfather can. I know for a fact, I said, hey, as long as I don't have any outside kids like my dad, I'm not like him. I know for a fact, I said, hey, as long as I'm not doing no crazy street drugs like crack and cocaine, I'm not like him. But guess what? I'm sorry, my land is addiction. That's the land that my fathers possessed. I gotta own that. My land is childhood trauma. That's the land my fathers possessed. Now, here's the reality about land. Land works two ways. Either you completely abandon it and leave it alone, and it becomes almost the desert. Weeds will grow or nothing will grow. You get poor vegetation. Nothing of wealth, of value will grow in the land that you're trying to abandon. But if you actually tend to that land and address that land, you're going to start reaping a harvest out of that same land. Your harvest, just FYI, I have to remind people this, it does not got to look like mine. So no, I am not saying that you guys are going to have to sit up here and jump in a podcast and tell everybody that you're a Christian sex addict or porn addict. I am saying that once you address your childhood trauma, once you confront your addiction and you find that opportunity that comes after it, well, then your land's going to start growing. The men that we work with, it astonishes me. I see them, oh my gosh, Craig, we have entrepreneurs, we have business leaders, we have people in literally almost every industry. We have successful people, like by any metric. We have people in this program that are successful in any other metric of life, any other standard of life. And to think that they're only going to get better now that they have confronted their childhood trauma and they've engaged and accepted their recovery. They're only going to grow out of that process here. So more of their land that they have, they thought their land looked great before. So I just want to take today, guys, again, Craig, thank you so much just for the opportunity to continue just sharing on my journeys, my experience in being a Christian and also being in recovery here as well. Seriously, men, either A, get in contact with us with the link below, or really listen, give yourself the best gift this season. If you're looking for a place to kind of get reborn, if you're looking for a place to really say, now here's a place where, again, I can bring my faith and get the right tools, go ahead and join our self-study program. Be a part of the webinar calls.
Yeah, thank you, George. Thank you so much. So, you know, it's that history, that legacy. There's a in the internal family systems model, they call that the legacy burden. Legacy, because it's old, the legacy of alcoholism, the legacy of poverty, the legacy of addiction, and we carry that. We carry that. Yeah. In the crisis that has people reaching out to us, gives them the opportunity to use that crisis as a catalyst to create massive change in their lives and lay that legacy burden down so they can be better men, they can be better husbands, they can be better fathers. And I'm so grateful for you, George, on the team, helping these guys dig in. And like George says, if you are interested in giving yourself the gift of healing, the gift of self-control, the gift of healthy sexuality, and a great life, the gift of forgiveness, click the link below. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to George at themindfulhabit.com, George at themindfulhabit.com. Thank you so much for listening. Honored and privileged that you shared your most precious resource with us. Thank you for sharing your journey, George. Anything before we wrap?
My brother, no, again, man, just thank you. And again, listen, I know it is. I've been there. If you're still in that space of just a struggle, so if nothing else, feel free to just reach out. Maybe what you need is just a conversation. So if you even just want to reach out, try to set up a call. I love to talk with you guys, but make a step. Choose action. Stop trying to reject your cross. You don't have a choice in it, but you can be transformed from it. Can't wait to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, George. Bye, everybody.